Hi, I'm Julian Melissus. I'm from Asheville, North Carolina. Today I'm talking to you guys about a blank screen. Thanks. Building component-based style guides and documentation for your next front-end project. I know it was the longest title ever, and I didn't mean for it to be that long. I realized later it would just be this. Just to get an idea of who's in the room, like who I'm talking to, front-end designers, back end, this is mostly like a front-end talk, so everybody's still good? Okay. Tiny bit about me. Also, I will be using emojis a little bit because I like emojis. That's my Twitter handle. I'm technical director at Craft Peak. We're a really small little agency in Asheville. We do WordPress, not WordPress, React, Angular, Ember, Backbone. Our website's actually depressing. It's the one page because we're so busy. We do lots of cool web applications, websites, and stuff like that. A little bit of everything. I like to think I've dabbled in a lot. A little bit about me. I like dogs. I've got 2 dogs. Just recently got motorcycling. Bought one 3.5 weeks ago. I've put in 2,200 miles on it. Music, cooking, and other stuff. Those are my 2 dogs. That's Dinah. That's Wilbur. She's really smart and he's really dumb. And that's my motorcycle and the Blue Ridge Mountains. So that's like only a 30-minute ride from my house. Most days I do WordPress development. One kind of cool thing I like to think is I'm on the Roots.io team. We do, has anybody heard of Roots stuff? Okay, cool. So if you guys, this is what I like about not being at a WordPress conference is we actually get a little bit of, there's some people have different opinions on us, but we take a lot of concepts from other development places and kind of apply them to WordPress. WordPress has a lot of backwards compatibility. WordPress has a lot of legacy code. WordPress has a lot of processes that haven't necessarily been updated to really match like modern development practices, and so we actually have started to implement those. We used to have Capstone deployments. We now have Trellis, which is like a Vagrant. You can run it on Vagrant, run it on DigitalOcean, Ansible deployments. Really cool stuff there. I work on, yeah. I am. There's one right here. Yeah, no problem. I work on Sage. Sage is a starter theme for WordPress, but it uses Gulp, and it used Gulp a while ago. It used Grunt when Grunt first came out. We started using Sass like a long time ago. We have Bower. We have an entire like asset pipeline, and we are moving to Webpack very soon. And we also abandoned WordPress coding standards, adopted PSR4. There's a bunch of cool security stuff we do. We now have a vCrypt plugin. Lots of cool stuff. So anyways, check it out if you want. I have recently done a lot of JavaScript development, React, Ember, Angular, a little bit of Backbone. And Corey and I also do a ton of UI, UX consultation, just going in, talking about how your interface might work and how your team can improve to build up on that stuff. So first thing I wanted to mention is all this stuff we're talking about are new things. This talk is based on experiences that I've had in the past, but I'm not an expert. We've all done things different ways. Obviously, you do what works best for you. Some of these concepts I'm talking about are like the best case scenario, and we don't even get to do it in everyday practices. So just want to kind of mention that as well, and always happy to take suggestions and other implementations of these concepts. So we've all probably heard this, or we've all probably worked with this before, but somebody just says, okay, I want to build a web application, right? And there's usually some pretty specific steps that we at least start with. So this is how we used to do it, right? Okay, business requirements, maybe start from wireframes, full design comps, front-end development, and we're doing back-end development, we're hooking it all up, and then tests, quality analysis, and all this stuff, and we got a launch. And there's a couple things a little weird about this, but just want to first be like, okay, this is what a wireframe looks like. We've all probably seen these before. This might be like what a design comp looks like, and this is like, a huge long page mobile design comp. And then maybe what it looks like when it's done. So a couple things change. You'll notice here. So as we all know, web applications are like continuously developing things, and when they're done, they're not really done, right? They're launched, and then you're going to make a bunch of changes in the first week, in the first 2 weeks, in the first couple months, and those changes are where it gets really hard to keep track of as soon as you're done with launch. We very rarely talk about that in that process. There's a couple problems with this situation. Design and the development team have a huge disconnect in a lot of cases. A designer will be maybe never even talk to a front-end developer, be outsourced, it'll be to different companies. This can take a lot longer. I don't know if you noticed, but like that looks very similar to that to me. So sometimes I almost wonder, why are we doing full design comps? We could start working on code, like do our designers know some code, right? We've also got traditional, so traditional designers don't know code, and it can make some things really hard to build, hard to test. I only showed a couple screen sizes, but we're talking about a lot of screen sizes now. Nothing's like, it could be even on a TV. And that brings us to the next thing, which is, you really can't make flexible design comps. That doesn't exist. So how we used to do it, and this is kind of what I'm proposing, best case scenario, how I'd like to start doing things now, or at least we start moving towards this. So obviously you've got to do the business requirements, but instead of wireframes, you can start considering live wireframes. If your designers don't know a little bit of HTML to add borders to things and maybe get a grid system together, I think it would be a really good exercise for them to start understanding how that works. And we can start even testing where things go on mobile and where things move to. And you don't have to do colors, you don't have to do crazy positioning stuff. It's just that's where we're starting, or where we could start. And then what I'm going to be talking about mostly is a live style guide, where you can start actually building the parts of your application in almost like a document, a page, or a collection of pages to actually show what those pieces might look like. And at the same time, you get to start testing there. You get to start testing as soon as those things are being built. Then after that, you've already got all these components, these things in our style guide. You can start hooking those up. Start transferring data, changing state, seeing what buttons do, click functions, swipe functions, those kind of things. And then launch. So it's less steps, obviously it's different work. I want to say more work sometimes, but I think you could also be looking at a lot less work as well. So the first thing to talk about is style guides. And I broke this up into 3 things. We've got style guides, next level is documentation, and then I want to talk about components. So why do we like style guides? First of all, have you guys ever heard of style guides or used style guides in projects? Okay, great. So we really like them. We do it on every project, every new client, whether or not we're doing branding work for them or not. Because it's a one-stop reference for brand standards, typography, colors, and various component styles, like maybe some buttons or something simple like that. It's a good place to start because there's no question, there's no weirdness about what color do I use for a hover state, what color do I use for the links. It's always should be in the style guide. Everybody can reference this. Designers, print designers, development team. That is also why our clients like them, because we can give them this style guide when they're done, and they can continue to use this for a long time. It's a really powerful tool. This is an example of a style guide that we did for the start of a web application. You're not supposed to be able to read everything on here, it's fine, but we have some fonts, we have some sizes, we have line heights that we even like to use, different headings and colors. This is labels here. These are buttons, different button sizes. We kind of made them their own front-end framework, like a lot like Bootstrap or something like that. So you can take it one step further. HTML, it's going to end up being HTML and CSS anyways. So just make live style guides right away. Like I said, they could know enough to start coding maybe, and then, you know, transitions and cool stuff like that, they're going to have fun learning as well. So, you know, just go ahead and do that. Start putting those in there. One benefit is you get live previews on all different device sizes. So already in your style guide, you can see how things stack, move around, move over, what a hover state might look like on a phone. You know, sometimes you forget, but like you can't actually do that. So start there, and then front-end development team can actually start working on some more complex problems, while designers can be finishing, tweaking line heights, changing things like that. Obviously, this is under the assumption that our designers either know code or would like to learn code. Obviously, this takes a little longer, so there could be some intermediate steps, but it would be great if it would all work like this. One other thing that I really like about this that kind of people forget about is if you're putting this in version control, you can actually document changes to your project. So when a color change was made, or when some kind of other design decision was made, you can actually say changed primary color to blah 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 per whatever. So you actually have a play-by-play of what happened to your project and kind of where that's evolved. I think this early beginning stages of a web application can be pretty messy. You're throwing things around, you got somebody with Sketch open, you got somebody next to you trying to change line heights and like all this stuff, and I think it's really cool to have a documentation of that process. Speaking of, instead of this is your application, so you've got 50 views or 100 views or 30 views or whatever, and really, at the end of the day, you've got to understand how that all comes together. You can go page by page and view by view and start adding on Sass files per view and things like that. But really, we're talking about, if we can take a step back and do documentation, we're talking about something that's going to live through the life of the project. And also, we've left sometimes companies and been like, oh, well, I know everything about how that was built, but then sometimes you just get a really, really great job, or you're not the right client for the project, or something like that, and you're like, okay, peace, and then somebody else has to pick up where you left off. And that can be really hard. There's no documentation. That can be really hard. So who's ever done front-end documentation for a project? Okay, great to see. And I think that it's being done a lot more. There's been a lot of people doing that. But just for those who haven't, it's one place to reference what's part of an application may look like. That could be buttons, that could be sliders, that could be headings, that could be type. Somebody added in people like poop and you should give them poop. I feel like that's Adam, but I don't know. This is why passwords are important on your computer. Easier to show options or explain how your project's code works. Backend developers can stay consistent. This has actually been really helpful, I've found. And then also test functionality of application pieces in different browsers and devices. So I'm actually going to get out of this really quick and show you guys some really good front-end documentation examples. And I'm running out of... Cool. Great. You guys have all seen Bootstrap, I'm guessing. But I still really like the documentation. Documentation before is really good. I think part of the reason why Bootstrap took off is they helped so well with documentation. But code examples of what to do, real readable English of like instructions. These are all really, really good, consistent things that documentation should have. See how aspects of the Bootstrap grid system work. It's just English. It's easy to understand, and that's something people can get behind. Foundation. This is another really good one. They have a lot of complexity, and they've like broken it down into a really readable format. Base CSS. I don't know if you guys have ever looked at this one. I really, really, really love. This isn't like technical. It's super lightweight. It's tiny. I really love these guys' work. It's very simple. It's It's a very good starting place. But my favorite thing is really, really readable. To adjust the display of an element, use these utilities, use these classes, use this stuff, do this. Sometimes as like a front-end developer, you think it comes natural, it makes sense, you can just list all the classes. But for, I've worked on a project, and I'll show it to you guys, where the back-end developers were able to finish like a bunch of intermediate views, like login pages, and a bunch of random, like kind of those weird extra ones you don't think about, the designer doesn't maybe do. And they didn't have to ask me any questions because we had the classes right there. And it was like, oh, if you want to use this kind of button, do that. This is what this button is for. Back-end developers can go in and make all these extra things. I don't know if anybody's seen this, but it is absolutely outstanding, and I applaud the UX Digital Services team for this entire effort. It's really a cool way to see that they're paying attention, but they noticed a huge discrepancy between UIs and UXs for government projects, and they decided to come up with standards. Every button. So like start buttons would be red. I don't know who made that idea up, but like red, like don't do this, but you have to click it. Doesn't make any sense. So we get a lot of really cool stuff from US Digital Services, and this is open source, it's on GitHub. It's really, really high quality. They have really cool grid, buttons, accordion, form controls, like all this stuff is awesome because you can dump this into your project. It's all there, it's all real, it's all live, and we know what it looks like on different screen sizes. So it's really cool. So creating this for your project every time can be pretty awesome, and actually really empowering for the entire team. So what goes into those front-end docs? Style guide items are a good place to start. Often I'll take our style guide and turn it into the first couple pages of the documentation. So maybe we have our typography section and buttons. That's something that it's at least a good place to start if you're not sure where to start. You can show all the button combinations. You could offer some copy and paste starting code, and I'm going to show that. That gets really cool for you to use or for other people who are going to use on the project after you. How to get the project up and running locally. Have you ever got handed a project and been like, well, where do I start? It's kind of nice just to say, hey, run npm install, run bower install, run whatever, and run npm start, or run gulp start, or run, we've got so many tools. It's helpful if you just have some really easy examples. Also, one place, if we have time or if we can agree on it, how to actually write our code. So a code style guide is really cool to add into the projects as well. This is what our JavaScript should look like. Use spaces, not tabs. Use this, use that. We don't like Yoda conditions, like crazy stuff like that. And then brings me to the next thing, components. So who has experience with with React components or using components in Ember or something like that? Okay, cool. So there's also a lot of other componentization methods, such as a partial, right? Like a file that holds a layout. That's technically a component. So you can take this idea very far. React crushes it though, and so I'm going to be focusing mostly on React because I think we got it right. First of all, component is a part or element of a larger whole, especially part of a vehicle or machine. Think a web application you can count under a machine. And quickly, why we use components? First of all, it keeps you dry. Not repeating yourself. You've got one place where you can reference, this is what this component, this is what this layout looks like. It's easy to divide up labor across teams. You can have one person building all the buttons and one person building all of the accordions or whatever other kind of UI elements, and they can kind of come together. Once you have that style guide ready, your styles are there, start messing with it. Obviously, somebody needs to make things consistent and arrange, but if you have a multidisciplinary team, sometimes views are a really hard thing. You get all these discrepancies between one screen to the other. Whereas if you can start on components, at least those look consistent through the application. They're easy to rearrange and put together. And one of my favorite things is with React, it's possible to share, publish, and open source components. So if you guys are interested in seeing a drop zone, like where you can drop a file into a page, WordPress.com, people at Automatic made Calypso, and Calypso is a open source, it's React, it's an Electron app. So it's an Electron app built in React to administer WordPress sites. And while I don't personally use it because I don't really blog and it doesn't do all the things that I need it to do, the components, the React components in that are so high quality and so well documented on the GitHub that you can literally say, oh, I don't want to have to build a drop zone. Grab that drop zone, change a couple styles, and your React component already does. You just need to hook it up. It's really cool. We have a bunch of those. So with React components and some other things, you can go in and start changing stuff. So basically we have this evolution from wireframes, style guide, building out views. And this has kind of changed into, okay, well you could do a style guide, but while you're doing a style guide, why don't you start doing documentation for front end? And while you're doing documentation, you may as well start building some components. So first thing I want to do is show you guys a couple projects. And I'm going to start with the first project where we really kind of hit home on the style guides and the documentation, but not so much the componentization part. This project was a redesign and rebuild of something called Get Connected, and what that does is it United Ways all over the country use this Css to volunteer to manage volunteer hours and like show events and calendar stuff like that. And it was technically sound on the back end, but you'd never be able to tell looking at the front end. It had never had a designer look at it or anything like that. So our task was to literally build HTML and CSS and deliver those in views so that the back end developers can hook them up. And we ended up doing documentation for ourselves because we wanted to kind of try that concept. So this is kind of what it looks like. This is actually not Aaron, this is just an example of a banner. But we have a way to get set up project. We used Grunt on this at the time. This was, I think, 2 years ago. We have type. This one H1 looks like, this one H2 looks like. You can see, you can start, things are going to change, and you'll notice this client was okay with Samuel L. Jackson. We built really cool spacing utilities. So margin, top. This is all built on top of Bootstrap. So we have Bootstrap, and we have it in Bower so that you can keep Bootstrap updated, but also have our own override files. And so you can actually put these classes on divs and watch them change your layouts without you having to write a lot of CSS. The coolest thing about this is we were actually not sure on spacing when we started. We didn't know if we wanted our gutter width to be 10 pixels, 20 pixels, or 30 pixels. So the reason why we did this is because if we can change one variable in our Sass, the entire application can change and be more readable, less readable. Our big thing was actually spacing for people with bad eyesight. We have a lot of older people volunteering and part of the community. So we did some testing and finally figured one out. We also went a little overboard and added all of these extra modifier classes. I like this one a lot. This is where we showed off all of our buttons, and it's just simple language to tell you, as the backend developer, we didn't actually assemble any views, so we're giving these to the backend team. They don't really do a lot of front-end development. And we're saying, okay, put the views together, and they were able to use all of this. You can see it right there, and it's pretty easy. And the way we run this is actually just a PHP server. Just like run PHP locally. This spins up. Muted buttons, form elements, switches, put the JavaScript in here, radio buttons, checkboxes. So you can kind of see we did that. Slideshows, video embeds, pretty fun. So you can start putting those things together and actually building components, right? We've got this box, which is like a kind of a well. We've got these cards. Some of this didn't make it to documentation 100% because we were cranking on it. But you can really start putting stuff together. And it's not that much extra work. You're already kind of putting file upload buttons in a place. So if you go and style a file upload button, you can just take 1 second out of your day and copy that code and go to your documentation file and say like just a little bit about it. This is what we did. This is where this lives. Copy, paste. Okay, great, you're done. So that worked pretty well. We ended up copying and pasting code a lot from other projects. It gave us a way to get started when views weren't 100% decided upon. It gave us a way to show examples of what these things might look like on mobile. And project worked really well, and I still get feedback from the backend developers. It's like, thanks for not making me have to hack up something just to make it look nice, or thanks for telling me where the Sass file was in the documentation so that I could go and figure out where that was styled. So it can be really helpful to your colleagues or your future self. Okay, so project 2.0, I can't tell you about the specific job or what it is or whatever because of the nature of the work that we did with the client, but we came on and we were supposed to do just UI, UX work, help the designer and front-end development, and they ended up hiring a React person who really knew his stuff and taught us a lot about using React in this componentized way. And so what we ended up doing was we do have documentation, and this runs with React and Webpack. It's really not up to date because our job for the project is over because they're hooking everything out and making it work. But so I made a couple changes in the style sheet and the colors as to not say who they are or anything like that. But we went a little bit further, and with React, you're actually able to use stateless components, or what they would call sometimes dumb components, and actually show, you can copy and paste stuff right from here into your project and actually start assembling views. It's kind of a funny story. We were, designs were taking longer than they were supposed to. Everybody was asking where it was, and we were like, well, we're working on the documentation. And eventually he was like, I think you guys need to stop working on documentation and start just building views. And we were like, no, you don't understand. We're building components and we're about to put them together. And we finished with our last 2 components, and a week and a half later, literally 10 days, we had 50 views assembled. So our components were done, and we built 50 different screens for them to literally start hooking up in the back end. I'm going to show you guys some of the code because that's where it gets really cool. This is all style guide crap. We built a cool little grid system. It's kind of like Bootstrap and Foundation. It's just custom made, but there's a row component and a column component. We can pass columns properties, so you can say size 6 and size small up 2. So it takes properties like that and assigns classes using Jed Watson's class names library. You've got containers. There's really simple, ways to show you. It just shows you whatever you want to do here. We documented components, buttons. Buttons have different properties: size, mood, state, type, full width, whether or not. And so we say what type these properties actually are. So like the options that they can take, and then examples of how to use it. And this is when it got really fun. Is all you have to do in your view is import button from whatever React component file that is, and then copy and paste that code into your view, and you have a button. And it can take all of these states You can also change states on the buttons and stuff with your parent hands. It's pretty cool. So there's some filmery for you here. Different components here. I'm going to show off modals. This is an example of what this modal would contain. So copy and paste this code. It's a good place to start with your modal. And it's all in one place, and the file for that component is inside these components here. So if we want to go and look and see what a button is, you can see what it looks like right here. So this is using basically stateless components or dumb components. You see we're using React and we're using class names. These are all of the properties that we pull in here, as well as you can assign some other properties if you need to. This is the HTML that we return. And this right here, I'll show you guys how this works, but this is how we add our classes. Define prop types, so if we want to do type checking for React components, make sure that you're not passing a string into full width that's supposed to be receiving Boolean. And we have this here, which is kind of my favorite part, and it's using all this really juicy ES 2016, 15 stuff. Basically, what we have here is we have the base CSS names, the CSS is scoped for this component. And I know the CSS seems like it's a lot, but the Sass ended up being really easy to write as well, as long as we follow the same methodology. And so we say if there isn't a size, so these are our defaults. We say if we don't have a size for the button, give it medium. Or if we don't have a type, give it type default, right? So we give these classes. None of these are going to evaluate to being true if we have, or to being false if we have these. So then our non-defaults are right here. We have full width, prop state, if prop state. So the way class names works is you say this is the class you want if this returns true. So if I were to, if we had an extra prop and I just wanted to have class, some props, add class, like that. So that's how that works. So it would add a class if props add a class was true. That's it. That's the component. This is what a button looks like. And what's cool is this, to me at least, is really super duper readable. You know what a button looks like. You know how a button works. You know how a button gets its classes, and you know how a button, and you know what props you have to give to a button. And that's all documented. All we have to do is copy and paste some of this stuff and make it readable in documentation. And that's it. So when they make changes to a button on the project, they're really easily able to go in here or going back into the documentation and just keep those up to sync. As long as they can do that, it's just so easy to use. When you onboard a new developer, you're like, okay, well here's everything. It's almost self-documenting. And you can see this for a lot of different stuff. This is a column, container, row. The Sass looks similar. You can do inline styles. There's no way I was doing that for this project because we're so much reusability, a lot of Sass variables and stuff. And Webpack takes care of a lot of that for us as well. So it's pretty cool once you start getting these components done. Icons is one of my favorites. Like, you need to use an icon for anything. I did this so much I just made myself a guide because I was copying and pasting icon styles. And like I would look at the design mock-up, and then I would look at this and be like, oh, it's definitely this one because this one looks too big and this one's too small. It keeps everything super consistent. It's just like, grab that, paste it to where it needs to go. So what happened is we then had demos that came together super quickly. It's hard to like document page containers and like stuff like that, like page headers and stuff like that. It's just really hard to document that. So we ended up really copying and pasting that from other views. Those are just kind of hard to show inside something, but like this, all of these got hooked up really fast. and you're able to just go right in there and start messing with components. And Adam worked on this project with us, and like Adam would change a component, and we'd have like no merge conflicts, and his updates would already be in my view. And so if he made a component look better, or actually have like real working functionality and hooked up, he could do that while I'm still building a different view. Same thing with the designer. We had like the designer, we taught React like JSX2 basically as soon as he was done with the design comps to be approved and stuff. And he was just doing Sass changes, changing line heights, changing all this stuff. And he was over there doing all that, and as soon as we merged in changes, the application looked way better, and we were still able to work on our functionality. So it's cool because you can, with the idea of components, you can have this almost isolated workspace, and then those changes trickle across the application. And like I said, 50 views actually assembled, not doing everything, but ready to have on-click handlers and state changes and stuff. 50 views assembled in like 10 days is crazy, and I was amazed that it was possible. So at this point, that's kind of like the extent of the demos. So who works with React right now? Okay, anybody happen to work with like PHP or those kind of things? Okay, I haven't done it and I haven't finished it, but the next Roots project that I will be working on is a component library called Clover, and it will do stateless components, and it's not going to be WordPress specific. It'll do stateless components, like basically like JSX components, but for PHP. So, like you can add class names and you can register new components and you can put them places. It's really just because I'm super frustrated with the WordPress templating system and like want to be able to start building components and projects like in little tiny PHP files as we start projects, and then just copy and paste them all into there. So. Obviously with React you get the best of both worlds. If you have a slider component, for example, and it has all this JavaScript attached to it, and you say like, I'm requiring this slider library, and I need these things to work when I click these buttons, it's cool because Webpack, if you're using Webpack with React, it'll automatically go find those dependencies and build your little pack for you and serve that to the browser. And WordPress doesn't have like an asset pipeline or anything like that. So I'll run into some issues there, but you can follow along if you want to. I'll probably end up like tweeting about it or something eventually. So that's kind of it. I would be happy to show you guys some more examples. If anybody has any questions, let me know. I hope you got a good idea for at least one thing. Yeah.
Have you used the WordPress API at all, or do you think that's production ready at this point?
It's funny because like as soon as I go to a conference, it's not a WordPress conference, somebody asked me that exact question. Yes, I have used the WordPress API. I know a lot of the people who worked on that. Really, really cool project and really awesome. I think it's talked up a lot. It's not done, first of all. FYI, like it's totally not done. It's very easy to use, and it's very easy to add your own like endpoints, and it's pretty impressive to see WordPress as a backend because when we do this web application build, we're talking about the front end, and often like the back end gets forgotten the administration side. And the cool thing about WordPress is like the admin experience is outstanding. It's really pretty, it's accessible, which is really rare. It's easy to use, there's lots of plugins. So if you want to make like a React application and hook it up into WordPress, it's easier now than it ever was. That said, it's really easy to make your own APIs with WordPress with like a tiny bit of PHP knowledge and knowing where to hook in a rewrite. And sometimes that can be easier to do than dealing with the API. But if you go to my site, sometimes it works because there's not a CORS issue, and sometimes there is a CORS issue with CodePen. I do not know why. But there's a post, if you go to my website, this is how easy it is to get data from the WP API. And it's an example with React, Angular, and Backbone. And all it does is grab 10 posts from the WordPress documentation website, which lets you ping their API so you can test it out. And it's literally as easy as installing a plugin to get that parity, like the plugin that they already have on your site, and then hooking it up and changing these. And it's very simple. Eventually, I got a little carried away and made a backbone example because I wanted to. And then another WordPress core contributor, the guy who built the media library, he was just like, in Backbone, if you're using Backbone with WordPress, they actually have their own JavaScript, and you literally just like wp.post.fetch gives you all the posts and JSON objects. So that's pretty sick. Still would rather use React, but Angular ends up being the smallest amount of code with like 15 lines. So it's pretty fun. It's easy to use, and it opens up a lot of possibilities, especially if you have like legacy stuff running. If you have like a whole app running on, or a whole site running on WordPress, you just want to do a couple things and not have to train everybody on a new backend, all this crap. Do that. Make some new fields with like a post meta, and expose them to the API, and it's super possible, super easy to do. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm assuming, and you might have said this, and I was talking about whenever you were giving the React example, I'm assuming that like the components that you're including in stock are the same components that are live, so that as those get updated, your style guide is automatically updated as well?
Yes.
Accurate.
Yes. So thank you for saying that. I was supposed to say that. That style guide right there with all the demos and all that stuff, that entire Git repository is an NPM dependency for the live site. So we edit the components in the style guide there, and then they put those together later. And as far as I know, that's how the project has still continued to go. It could be different, and you could put it all in one repository. Obviously, you could just start building your web application in a different directory right there, and have React and Webpack doing all that. He wanted to do it look differently because he was doing a lot of server-side rendering and like caching and a bunch of different stuff with Express.
So on the like PHP side of that, so WordPress or whatever.
Yep.
Is there a tool that you use there to allow you to update? You know what I mean? Rather than having to like copy and paste markup from one place to another, like that would allow you to update components in PHP.
Oh, like with
and then have it populate.
Yeah, with that library that I'm hoping to do.
Yeah, maybe.
You mean? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, but basically, so I'm not sure exactly what you're asking, but I think you're saying like we have components that live somewhere, but we have a production application and our style guide and all that stuff. Those store in those components, and you want to keep those in sync so that you don't have to copy and paste actual like tons of HTML and markup and stuff. Yeah, so I think the best way to do it is either two ways. Build your style guide into your application, so there's a specific view for your application where your components live in those style guides, and that's your documentation, and it's your live site. That's the easiest place. You have one repository, and everything's there. The other way to do it would be to use your components as literally, you have to have one source of truth. So if your components are where you just define how your components look in your style guide, then you're only referencing those from somewhere else. So if you're using JavaScript, using an import to that component, and you can npm install it. Or if you're using PHP or another library, I'm sure there would be a way to do this in Ruby or anything. You would basically pull that private package in from like a package manager and use your components in that way. It seems like a lot to get around, I feel like. And so if I was actually building this huge monolithic application, I'd probably put it all into one place. And I'd have my components living in the same repository as my application, and just have a bunch of private views. Adam, do you have any other ideas for that?
Well, we use Css Code, which is like another tool that you can use to scan your SAS files or CSS files for any specific content, and does the documentation based on that.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
They just added like a twig billing later thing. So we're hoping that with like AAA, because it's Twig based, that there's gonna be some weirdness there that we're gonna have to like deal with. But the idea is whenever we need our base house or something, we update it. And the Twig file is for, the style diagram and that is built and, Drupal uses the same ones, the same style.
I'm kind of a mess, a lot like separation. I always have my own private NPM package for the style guide. Because then you can give someone access to that, and they can test stuff, and make sure it works, and they don't have access to the core code.
That's the reason why we ended up doing it in a separate one, because we didn't have basically authority to mess with the data structure of their application, but they wanted it to look right. So, good question. I'm hoping the other person that's helping me build that library is also a Drupal person. So, I'm hoping that the library that I'm like we would all love to be able to build front-end React applications all day, right? But like sometimes a single page app doesn't even make sense for what you need. So I'm trying to like take those ideas that I really like from JSX and all that and make it usable in like my everyday, which would be WordPress or PHP or this E project we're about to start working on.
And I haven't seen it, I'm not just searching around, trying to see if this is something where it's September, right, to the WordPress
Yeah.
Twig.
Yeah.
It seems like it's
It's-
right there.
Yeah.
Twig components you can pull it on here.
Yeah, it'll have somewhere in September, and it'll definitely work with Twig as well, because I like Twig. So, cool. Any other questions? Good. Thanks for coming.